This is Matrilineal Broadcasting Corporation. Inspired to inspire.
Okay, Dr. Ndlovu, do you have anything that you like to add or subtract on what Dr. Skabate has just shared with us?
Thank you very much, Babunkala. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
Yes. And once again, thank you again to Babu Skabate and every member of the panel. Yes, thank you very much indeed for the historical foundation and the conceptual foundation that you have given us in connection with the nature of this state that we call Zimbabwe. Indeed, I wouldn't add more, especially if I look at the issue that institutions as the very organs of the state that one would think about were already captured by the time we come to 1980. So it goes without saying that indeed the capture took place a long time ago at the commencement of this, the life of this creature called Zimbabwe. What came to my mind was that if this state capture had already taken place by 1980, by the time people began to celebrate that independence, we noticed that there were people, as I have already said, who were enjoying it at some point, but there has been a progressive slide to a point where even those who once enjoyed some glory in Zimbabwe have finally lost it, because now it is controlled not even by ZANU-PF, not even by the government, but it has fallen into the hands of a few. I think that's where I would like to place emphasis, that the institutions that once were, of course, in fact, a lot of the people in this panel would agree with the fact that maybe they were not among those that were enjoying the fruits at some point, but at least there was a point when others were enjoying it. The reference to Guguraundi, it gives credence to the fact that those in Matabele and elsewhere were already feeling the brunt of the wrath of this captured state. But if you look at again the Will of Gate scandal, which was mentioned earlier, I always want to look at the reaction of the then, was it president or he was prime minister at that time, I can't remember, but he quickly instituted a commission of inquiry under Wilson Sandura, because at that point there was still a semblance of fear and respect for the people. Because you see, thinking about the state, maybe conceptually one would think of it as what contractarians have always called as an entity that comes about as a result of a tacit agreement between the population and those who are then vested with power. And then you find that the relationship continues on the basis of that tacit agreement, whereby the population lend their authority, and rather they lend their allegiance to those who are then vested with power, who in turn make a pledge to protect the welfare and the interests of the majority. So in that case, through that metaphorical, contract, one would expect that even within the concept of that captured state, as Babu Skabate has referred to, there should still be a kind of respect for that social agreement. You would, like I have mentioned the Willowgate scandal, and I said there was still a semblance of respect, a semblance of fear, considering that maybe people will one day bring the government to account. So even those early commissions like the Chihambakwe, the Tumbuchena, which were meant to investigate Guguraundi, though we know that eventually their reports were never publicized. But that was a reaction based on the fact that at that time, the institutions of government had not, established that stranglehold on the institutions, the parastatals as we see it now, whereby you find that parastatals like ZUPCO or the Grain Marketing Board are actually now beholden to certain private interests, where we now hear about the Queen Bee and the Taquire's have enjoying that exclusive control over the institutions and apparatus of the state. So I would say, whilst without discounting what Babus Kabade has said, I want to add that the continuity and the progress of this capture has moved from a point whereby maybe a certain ethnic group seemed to enjoy, but now we are at a point whereby the ethnic group itself, even ZANU-PF as an institution, has actually lost control of the state, because now it is only a small niche of people. It is only those that are connected, those that have access to control of fidelity printers and refiners, so that you find a situation whereby the gold, all the gold resources in the country now go through one conduit. They now belong to one person. They now belong to one family. So in that case, I would say, yes, indeed, the state has always been captured, but the level of capture has reached a crescendo. It has reached a level whereby now it is this whole institution called Zimbabwe is only at the service of the few who are actually at the top. And maybe I was going to also mention the issue of, I always want to talk about the military. There's a very interesting revelation that came up in 2017 when Chiwenga was addressing the army just before the coup that was staged. He actually indicated, without expressly admitting, that the Zimbabwe National Army, as we know it, has never been a national army, because he actually highlighted that he gave a narrative that in the 1970s, when ZANU-PF was experiencing problems in Mozambique and in Tanzania and so on, the army came in to put them back into rather to redirect them. So he then compared the 1970s role of the army with the role that he was about to take. And for me, that reminded me of the fact that an institution such as the Zimbabwe National Army has never been a national army in the first place. It has always been a ZANLA. So what then happened in 1980 was a transplantation of ZANLA from Mozambique, and then a renaming it and a rebranding it as a Zimbabwe National Army. But that explains why, when it had become very clear around 2008 that Morgan Tsvangirai was about to win, they came up in the open, the members, the generals, and said, no, even if you win, we are not going to support you. We are not going to salute you. So that is a clear indication that this thing called Zimbabwe is not serving the people. The social contract, in fact, I would be wrong to say the social contract collapsed, because it was never established. As Babus Kabate said, people were just brought in into the party to celebrate what they had not really been involved in the formation of. So even the attempt to maybe forge a social contract by adopting the 2013 constitution, you find that by 2017, again, the executive is overthrown through a coup. So that on its own then indicates that the social contract is no longer in operation. And then 2018, we have people electing their members of parliament, and then a plan is hatched through lawfare, and then those MPs are expelled from parliament under what is called what we call this party recall system. So those are some of the issues or indicators that highlight the fact that indeed we are dealing with a captured state that is not serving the interests of the people, but is saving the private interests of those that control it. Thank you very much. I think I can stop there for the time being.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Dr.
is
Ndlovu. State capture a bad thing? What are its negative consequences? That question, I'm posing it to Dr. Ndlovu. Then I will pose the same question to Mr. Moore. Over to you, Dr. Ndlovu.
Oh, thank you very much, Babunkala. It's a very interesting and a tricky question at the same time. The question says, is it a bad thing? And is there a time when it is a good thing? Right. As Dr. Mhlanga highlighted earlier, there is no state that is not captured. It is rather a question of degree. So between two states, you are not looking at the nature of the capture, but you are looking at the degree. Now, thinking then in terms of whether it can at one point be good or at one point be bad, I think it's all about coming back to the issue that I spoke about earlier on, the issue of this imaginary agreement between the people and the state. In fact, Dr. Mhlanga mentioned the six, I'm sure, six functions of the state. And still, that was expressive in a way of this imaginary contract between the people and those that govern. So depending then on how that relationship is functioning, maybe we can go back to look at why do we have a state in the first place? Why did people decide at some point? Maybe somebody might say they never decided, but somehow everybody finds themselves belonging to some polity or some structure or organization one way or the other. And the question is, what is the rationale for belonging to that kind of an institution? That then brings us to the issue of, the state of nature, where somebody would say, before that is a pre-state society, life is brutish and short. In other words, there are no rules. It's the law of the jungle. It's survival of the fittest. And so, because without a state, we then have this survival of the fittest, it then goes without saying that it becomes necessary to submit yourself to an authority so that it can control the territory, maintain that sovereignty, deploy the army and the police to ensure that there is safety for everybody. So in the case of a well-structured and well-designed state, where you find that whilst the state itself pursues its own interest of enjoying that hegemony over the land and over the people, it also proffers that protection that people require. So when that relationship works in such a way that it is mutually beneficial to both parties, I would say then to that extent, yes, capture is to some extent acceptable. But again, maybe taking it a little bit further to say, state capture, in its conceptualizations, as Dr. Hadebe did refer to its history in connection with the collapsing communist, that Soviet Union, and the emergence of new states in the former Soviet bloc, you find that it is systemic corruption, it is systemic decay in the institutions of government, to the point that the people who are not exactly, powerful within the context of society find themselves living very precariously, because you see, once there is that corruption, which erodes the whole fabric of the state institutions, then the level of protection that is expected from those institutions is no longer something that you can rely upon. So on that note, state capture in its extreme forms is not desirable, particularly because then we are looking at how the interests of a few oligarchs, a few select, are now having to prevail. You find, as you would have in the example of South Africa, where the Gupta family had become so accessible to the cabinet that it was now beginning to, directly influence policy and even get so involved in the appointment of functionaries, even cabinet posts. For instance, the story of how they were offering cabinet posts to the likes of Mcebisi Jonasi rather, would actually speak of the extent of the rot and the decay and how everybody else had become vulnerable, if one would say. But again, maybe taking it historically, you notice as somebody, I think it was Dr. Mguni, who highlighted the fact that it is traceable back to the colonial system. So in a way, the state has always been captured, but as I said, it's a question of extent. At some point, say in Rhodesia, the state was captured, but people were still able to pursue lives and live decently. Even in early Zimbabwe, the state was captured, but there was some level of decency. But come now to these extreme scenarios that we have, where almost everybody, including the former beneficiaries of that captured state, if one could talk in terms of ethnicity and how a certain ethnic group had benefited at some point, we now come to a point where not anybody at all is enjoying even any decency that is associated with being human. Because if you look at the people in Zimbabwe across the spectrum, they have been dehumanized. So in that sense, I would say state capture is something to be closely watched and to be discouraged, because at its extreme point, it impoverishes, it diminishes humanity, and it makes everybody a pale shadow of who they ought to be. I would like to end it on that.
All right. Okay. Siyabonga, Baba Ndlovu.
Anginawo amaningi, ngiyabonga kakhulu ithuba, ngibonga ama-panelists kube yithuba elihle, Babu Sigabade, Babu Hadebe, Babu Uvelile Moyo, Babu Nkala for ever being there, noBabu Umguni osesuke wahamba ngokushesha. Asibongeni ithuba. Good night, God bless you all.
Siyabonga kakhulu, sibonge kakhulu ama-panelists ethu, sibonge nama-participants engingasawanikezanga ithuba. Sibonge nabo bonke abalaleli nababukeli beMathuleni Broadcasting Corporation. Igama nguThulana kaNkala, ngithi khulu.
This is Mathuleni Broadcasting Corporation. Inspired to inspire.